Hey there, my name is Jason. I am the founder of Distress Loan Advisors. I've been consulting with SBA borrowers since 2009, primarily related to the SBA Offer and Compromise. If you're a regular on this channel, I typically talk mostly about EIDL loan developments, but today I'm not going to. So if you're looking for answers on an EIDL loan, you can stop the video here. The focus of this is a 2024 update with regards to the SBA 7A Offer and Compromise, and to a lesser extent, the 504 loan. But 7A, by and large, is the largest SBA loan program out there, and so most of the settlements that I do are around the SBA 7A loan. So the purpose of this video is to sort of, from soup to nuts, explain the entire process and try to give you some insights that I've picked up along the way. 15 years of doing this, I've seen a lot, I've done a lot, and I'm hoping I can pass on some of the tidbits to you. So by the end of this video, you fully understand the offer and compromise process. So let's say your business is not doing well and you've decided that you need to close the business. And so people always call me up and they want to know, what's the order that I need to do things? I want to close, I don't know what to do. So before we can get to an offer and compromise, we have to do a couple of things. First, the business needs to be sold or closed. So if you sell it as a going concern to someone, that's fine. If you don't have anyone to sell it to, the alternative is you close the business down and you liquidate all of the business assets. Note that I say the business assets have to be liquidated. Every once in a while, I get an SBA lender who doesn't know what they're doing, and they're telling borrowers that they have to sell their personal residence before the SBA will consider a settlement. That's not true, and they don't need to be selling personal assets. In order for the SBA and the lender to be able to review your SBA offer and compromise on your 7A loan, the business has to close or be sold, and all the assets have to be liquidated. So that's the general order of things. Step 1, close. Step 2, liquidate. Step 3, submit the offer. I'm going to get into greater detail on all of that, but I just wanted to lay out at the very beginning what the order is here, because people often want to submit an offer right away and the business still has assets. So basically the SBA wants to sell everything that the business has, apply it to the loan balance so they know when they're evaluating the offer and compromise exactly how much is owed and there's not a sale of assets that's pending. All right, so before we get started, I just want to give some general tips here. And if some of this sounds familiar, it's I have like a sort of a cornerstone piece of content on my website, and it's everything that I'm going to cover here. So if it sounds familiar, it's probably because you read it on my website. So first and foremost, when things start to go wrong with your business and you're thinking that you're going to have to settle it, do not ghost your bank. So in other words, if they call them back. If they email you, reply promptly. If you become the type of person who doesn't respond and they're constantly chasing you, when you come back around and ask them to do you a favor by settling, it's going to start out poorly because they're going to feel that you're not committed to the process. So don't be a ghost. Next, you have to save some money for a rainy day. Any settlement is going to require a material cash payment. And so you can't go into an offer and compromise with nothing and expect them to let you go. And I've had people come to me who have tried to settle on their own, and they send me their offer, and the explanation as to why they can't pay is they don't have anything, and so they're just seeking a release. They don't offer you an outright release. You have to give them something. So make sure that when it becomes apparent that you're going to need to settle, that you start to conserve cash, and because the difference between settling and not is having something to offer them. If you use all of your money, say, to keep a business afloat, and you think that once you run out of money, then they'll just let you off the hook. That is incorrect. So one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make is they hold on to the business too long. They put in all of their personal assets, all of their cash, and then there's nothing left at the end. And unfortunately, that means it's unlikely that you're going to settle. One other point that I want to make is that you really want to make sure that you're also talking to your landlord. Next to the SBA loan, the landlord is probably the biggest commitment that your business has. And so you just want to make sure that A, there's a personal guarantee, because some don't have it. But B, that you're keeping them apprised, because if selling your business is going to be a component here, you need your landlord to be willing to grant a lease to the buyer of your business. So, if you don't have a good relationship with them, they may not feel like, it's business, but you get my point. Just do the right thing, be responsive, all the same stuff with the lender. You want to be with the landlord. You owe them a lot of money. It's a huge commitment. So you really need to play ball. So those are just some basic general things to start. Now we're going to get into the specifics of how this process is going to play out for you. So first, as we said earlier, you're going to close the business and you're going to liquidate, or you're going to sell it as a going concern. Either is fine. No one's going to fault you if you can't find a buyer for the business as a whole. Essentially, your options would be you can sell the assets yourself. So if you know people in the industry, or if you think you need to sell stuff on Craigslist, you can do that. Keep in mind, you always need the lender's permission to sell your business assets. So don't go and sell business assets unless they've specifically told you it's okay to do so. This is a really important point. If I've seen people sell stuff without the bank's permission, and the bank basically says that's fraudulent. You sold our collateral. That are okay. We didn't okay the price. So make sure you get permission. If you can't sell the stuff, the bank also has people that can do it. Typically, they'll hire a third-party auctioneer, and as long as the business assets have sufficient value, they'll put it in an auction, or often they'll have relationships so they can unload the stuff. And then finally, if the stuff's not worth anything, very often they'll just have the assets abandoned. So like if you're like a CPA and all you have is a couple of desks and lamps, it's not worth it for anybody to show up and get that stuff, so they'll just abandon it. And that's fine. As long as the asset situation is resolved, you can move on. So the next thing is assembling the offer. And so before you start actually assembling your offer, you want to touch base with the bank and make sure that they're on board with you submitting an offer in compromise. Now, in most cases, they're okay with it. They're willing to consider it. But, there are certain situations where they won't consider it. For example, if the loan is fully secured, so like if you owe them $500,000 and you had to pledge a property that's worth $1 million and it's unencumbered, it has no mortgage, there's no reason for them to settle. They're fully secured. They will get their money back. So in that case, they're not going to negotiate. I guess this is just a general point. They negotiate settlements when it makes sense for them. They do not negotiate settlements for the sake of negotiating settlements. So if they think they can get paid in full, they're not gonna accept any sort of offer. So keep that in mind. They're not required to negotiate with you if you don't think it's warranted. Why else would they not consider a settlement? If your income is clearly enough personally to repay the loan. So in other words, if I make $1 million a year and the loan payment on this is $1,000, they're going to say, you can afford this. We're not interested in the settlement. We think you have the financial wherewithal to pay. Another reason they may not want to consider a settlement is if all the guarantors on a combined basis can afford to repay the loan, they'll know they'll get it in bits and pieces, so they don't really need to settle with any one of you. And then the last one would be if you did something fraudulent, it may just disqualify you. So like I said earlier, if you sell assets without their permission, that could disqualify you. If you sell the business without their permission, that could disqualify you. if you lie to them about, really the nature of the sale of your business or the assets, that could be disqualifying too. And what I mean by that is, there are people out there who will tell you, go find a friend or a family member to sell the business to. And then that basically you can just lie to the SBA and tell them, oh, I sold it, but meanwhile, you really sold it to a friend who's just going to sell it back to you. So as I said in one of my articles, basically the best advice I can give you is you got to be honest and tell the truth. If you think offering compromise is about misdirection and sort of smoke and mirrors and basically BSing them, you're not going to get very far. You need to come to the table in good faith and basically show them your hand, lay your cards on the table, and let them make a decision. And the more open and honest you are, and the more that you can convince them that this is an honest attempt to pay everything you can, the better chance you have. If they think you're not taking it seriously, if they think that your arguments are very, very weak, like, oh, I can't borrow against my house because my spouse doesn't want to, or I have to pay for my 4 kids to go to college, stuff like that. By the way, college they consider basically discretionary, so you can't just avoid paying the debt that you owe because your kids need to go to college, because a lender would argue, well, plenty of people get student loans. Anyway, so basically those are the reasons why a lender might tell you at the outset, hey, sorry, we won't consider a settlement. But in most other cases, they'll gladly look at your offer. They have nothing to lose. So the first thing you want to do is assemble the loan documents. The easiest thing to do is just ask your bank what they want, because sometimes banks will ask for things above and beyond what the SBA asks for. But as far as what the SBA wants, I'll give you the list. It's IRS 4506C. So that's the updated, it used to be 4506T. 4506C is just a verification of your tax return, so they just want to make sure that what you're giving them was actually filed. SBA Form 912, it's just a background form. They want 2 years of personal tax returns. They need the SBA Form 770, SBA Form 1150, copies of 2 months of statements of all liquid assets, and also 2 months of pay stubs. Like, that's the basic package of information. They could ask for more depending on what your situation is and what questions they have, but that's the basics. Some lenders will ask for business tax returns. The SBA doesn't care. My opinion is, if the business is closed, who cares what the tax returns say? But some banks will ask for it, and that's why I say just ask them for their list in case it's slightly different or has additional stuff above and beyond what the SBA wants. So once you assemble all the documents, you're going to submit that to the bank, and then you're going to wait, because you have no control over how quick any of this goes. So you need to be patient. It's okay to follow up. Don't be a pest. So once you submit this stuff, it's super important to, one, be responsive. So if they come back with questions, make sure you answer them on a timely basis. So, if they send you an email today, don't wait a week. It doesn't have to be done right that second, but I would say within a day or two, you want to get back to them with your answers. And then the second thing is be thorough and direct. So in other words, if they smell BS from a mile away. So tell them real answers. They can tell when you're, trying to, put one by them. Like, for example, people try to argue, well, I could get fired at any time, so I really don't know if I can afford a payment. Well, pretty much all jobs are at will for the most part. So, that's not the type of argument that the SBA is willing to accept. So, be reasonable. When you're talking about your income, show them what your take home is. If you get bonuses, you have to include that, take an average. But you just want to be accurate and thorough, because if it seems like you're being evasive or incomplete in your answers, at some point they're just going to give up and they're going to view it negatively. So just be responsive while you're waiting. We can't control how quickly the decision's made. Most banks have a committee or a couple of signers, so it takes time to do that. And then, depending on your situation, there may need to, if there's real estate involved, there might need to be an appraisal. So, we can't control the timing of that. But, overall, you certainly can follow up and stay engaged. So if you want to follow up every other week and say, is there any news? Is there anything I can help with? Perfectly fine. Don't pester them every day and ask for updates constantly, every other day. These people are really busy. They probably have a lot of files. So, you can stay engaged, but like I said, don't be a pest. So finally, if we get it approved, hip, hip, hooray, we jump up and down. We're almost at the end, but we're not quite there. So the first thing is you want to get it in writing. So typically the SBA has this boilerplate email that they'll send to approve a settlement. What the bank does from there is really up to them. Some lenders will actually, they'll have their attorney draft a settlement agreement. And if that's the case, I think that's great. You're going to want to get your own attorney to review the settlement agreement to make sure it reflects what you think it reflects. And that's good. But I will tell you that there are some lenders who do not issue settlement agreements. They'll just forward you that email and say, sorry, I'm not giving you anything else. You could try to ask them, if they're willing to draft one at your expense, if they'd be willing to do that. I would recommend that because that way then you can have your attorney review it. Having a settlement agreement is very, very specific, whereas the general approval letter that you get from SBA it's certainly not a legal document. Beyond that, if it's approved, I always just confirm with the lender that both they and the SBA are in agreement here, because when the offer gets forwarded to the SBA, at that point, the bank is only recommending it for approval. And so if the SBA states they're going to approve it, I always just ask the bank, if they can just, in writing, tell us that they concur with the offer, and, just cover your bases. Another thing that I would note is, if they're telling you they want to get paid in 30 days and you don't think that's possible, get out in front of that as early as you can. So in other words, don't wait to day 29 and then go back to your workout officer and say, hey, I need more time. That's going to annoy them. And plus it creates unnecessary drama with you. I mean, really what you want to do is, if they say 30 days and a home equity loan is going to take 45, tell them right at the outset, give me 60 just in case there's a little wiggle room, and I'll keep you posted. I think that's a reasonable, way to do it. So that's, the basic steps if your loan gets, if your settlement offer gets approved. Now, what happens if your offer gets declined? Well, first and foremost, I would ask the lender if they have any insights as to, what is wrong with the offer, what is missing that they want to see. And that's just like sort of a common sense thing that, instead of us just arbitrarily guessing what the problem is and arbitrarily raising the offer, by understanding exactly what their concerns are, that can help us zero in on, potentially a better offer that we can make. So asking for details is always a good idea. And, that's pretty much the process, and if you get a decline and you want to improve it, you go back to the drawing board. I mean, typically if I'm involved, I'll look at the situation and say, where are the weak points in this deal for us and what can we do to mitigate them? I can't really tell you how to find that. That's, just part of what I do. But, if they decline it, you resubmit an offer and hope that they approve it. So that's the general process. Now what I want to do is just talk about all the frequently asked questions that I get in regards to the SBA offer and compromise, again, specific to 7A loans. So the first frequently asked question is, can EIDL loans be settled? As I said at the beginning here, this is not about EIDL loans. No, EIDL loans as of now, January 9th, 2024, EIDL loans are not eligible for offer and compromise. I do case evaluations for those and I explain to people what their options are, but at this point it does not include a settlement. Next, how long is the SBA offer and compromise process? I tell people you can plan on between 4 and 8 months. First, it's got to go through the lender's process. Sometimes they'll come back and ask questions. They'll ask you for additional documentation. So sometimes there's back and forth before they even make a decision. And then they send it over to the SBA. And, depending on what their workflow looks like, it could be, 2 to 4 months just waiting on an answer for them. So overall, I tell people 4 to 8 months, but every deal is unique. So it's really hard to tell because the bank is, unpredictable because they have a huge range, and so is the SBA. What can happen if you default on your SBA loan? So basically, if you don't pay them and you don't work out a deal, what's likely is going to happen is they can sue you. So they can try to get a judgment. If your home is pledged as collateral, they can try to foreclose on it if you live in a state where that's possible. And if they get a judgment, that means they can go after your wages, they can levy your bank accounts, they can really go after a lot of your personal assets. And that's why it's so important to try to settle, to try to avoid that whole process from even starting. And the way you do that is you make a reasonable offer that's based on your true ability to pay. Foreclosures. So one common misconception, I've had people call me and say, yes, my house is pledged, but the SBA is in second position, so they can't foreclose on me. That's wrong. If your loan is in a second lien position, what it means is if the second lien holder, let's say that's the SBA behind your first mortgage, if the SBA wanted to foreclose, they would have to pay off the first lender before they see any money, but it absolutely can be done. Next question. I never heard from my lender. Does that mean I'm off the hook? Absolutely not. Not every lender goes out of their way to follow up after a borrower has closed. Sometimes they're just as happy to just close their file and send it over to the SBA, and they don't want to deal with the offer and compromise. So don't mistake their silence for, sort of implicit forgiveness. If you have an inclination to settle it, you need to be proactive and stay in touch with your lender and let them know that you're interested in submitting a settlement offer. Because if you don't say anything to them, it's a very good chance that they close their file. And if it ends up at the Treasury, you're dead in the water. So be proactive. This is a good one. I once had a person tell me their bank told them this is a government loan, the SBA doesn't settle. That's just wrong. I mean, I've been doing this for so long. I wouldn't have a business. I wouldn't have been doing this since 2008, and I wouldn't have had a job when I worked for CIT, who was the biggest SBA lender in the country. They absolutely will settle. Next question. I paid too much for my business. Will the SBA write it down, so that I can continue to afford the payment? Generally speaking, no. I've never seen the SBA sort of just reduce the balance that's owed on principal. The only way that you could possibly do that would be in some sort of bankruptcy reorg, where basically what they would do is cram down the loan to the value of the assets. So in some cases, like if you owe $1 million and the building's only worth half, they would reduce the loan that way. But outside of bankruptcy, I can't think of an instance where the SBA has been willing to write down a portion of a loan and allow the business to continue to operate. The only way that they're going to forgive a portion of principal if the business is actually closed and all of the assets have been liquidated. Next question. So if the SBA guarantees 75% of the loan, does that mean that I'm only responsible for 25% of the loan balance? Unfortunately not. The 75% guarantee is for the lender, so it reimburses them for 75% of the loan balance. It does not get you off the hook in any way, shape, or form. You owe 100% of the balance. The 75-25 split is really just how the SBA entices lenders to participate in this program by saying if this borrower defaults and you underwrite this loan correctly and it defaults through no fault of yours, we will reimburse you for 75% of it. So again, that guarantee is for the lender. It is not for the borrower. The next misconception that people will often have is they'll come to me and say, I owe $500,000. I could probably sell my equipment for half of that. So I can raise $250,000. Would they settle for that? Unfortunately, you can't use the proceeds from the sale of the business of assets to fund your settlement. So in other words, like I said at the very beginning, the way this process works is the business has to close, the assets have to get liquidated, those funds get applied to your loan balance, and then we start talking about offering compromise. So you can't expect the sale of the business assets to be what funds your settlement. They will not allow that. That is, the sale of the assets is just a liquidation of collateral they already have. So that's not something you can use as a bargaining chip. They're already entitled to it. Next one. If you have a partner, say there's a 50-50 partnership, I've had people come to me and say, okay, I just want to pay my half, and he can pay his half. And so, that's what I want to do. And what I explain to them is that generally the guarantees that you sign are unlimited in nature. They're unconditional guarantees. So if you have two partners, if you both sign unlimited guarantees or unconditional guarantees, that means that you're both liable for it 100%. So if you're the guy that has all the money and your partner has none, the SBA is going to look to you to pay back the whole loan if you can afford it. It has nothing to do with your ownership percentage. Unless the personal guarantee specifically limits how much you're liable for all of it, and they definitely do not need to split the debt between two partners or based on ownership percentage or anything like that, because it doesn't work like that. Sorry, just flipping my notes. The argument that I had nothing to do with the business, or like I personally guaranteed this for a friend, those arguments go nowhere. And the reason is you sign a personal guarantee specifically for a situation like this. So if you're surprised that the SBA is now trying to hold you accountable, you didn't understand what the personal guarantee was for at the outset. So if somebody who is applying for the loan didn't have sufficient credit or assets or something like that, and you came in, say as, mom or dad or, a wealthy friend, the expectation is that if that person can't pay, that you're going to pay, and they're specifically asking you to guarantee just for this situation. So you can't really object to them trying to collect on the personal guarantee just because you had nothing to do with the business. Here's one. Sometimes lenders, and it's usually the origination guys, will tell them with a wink and a nod, hey, if you make payments for like a year, you can apply to have your home released from collateral, and then it won't be pledged. Generally, this is not true. Lenders are not willing to release the home unless they're going to get some cash for it. The only exception would be if you were moving. They'll let you sell your home. They'll allow you to go buy another home, but then they're going to want to lien on the new home. So, they're not just going to give away collateral that they took at the very beginning in exchange for nothing. Next question. Doesn't my corporate entity, like my LLC, my S Corp, my C Corp, doesn't that protect me? Like, how am I personally liable? And the answer is the personal guarantee. If the SBA didn't require personal guarantees from the business owners, you would be right, because then the S Corp would be the borrower, not you, so they couldn't come after you. But lenders understand this. And so for every SBA loan outside of like EIDL loans, which is a unique case, they all require personal guarantees because they understand if the business closes, there's probably more value to extract from you, the guarantor, than there is, a defunct pizzeria or whatever. So the way they get around the corporate shield is they require you to sign a personal guarantee. And that's why just having the LLC or the S Corp or the C Corp isn't going to protect you in this particular case. Next question. If I want to settle, do I need to file for bankruptcy for my business? No, the SBA doesn't require the business to be bankrupted. They typically just want proof that it's no longer operating, and that's sufficient. And in most cases, people don't bother bankrupting the business because if all the assets are sold and you're going to dissolve it anyway, and this is your only creditor, most people don't bother with the bankruptcy. Do I need to sell my personal assets? I covered that earlier. Absolutely not. You're not required to sell your personal assets. Only business assets need to be sold prior to a submission of a settlement offer. Now, if you want to raise money and selling your assets as part of it, that's fine. But what I'm saying is the part at the beginning where you have to sell all the business assets, that doesn't include personal assets, and specifically your home. Next question. Well, if I file for bankruptcy, will that protect my home? Because a lot of people think, well, I'll just bankrupt my way out of it, even though my house is pledged, because everything gets wiped away. Unfortunately, that is not the case. If you file for personal bankruptcy and there is a lien on your home, the lien will remain there. So if you file for bankruptcy, your personal guarantee might be discharged, but there's still going to be a lien on your home. So keep that in mind, because a lot of people are surprised to find out that even after the bankruptcy, they have to go back and negotiate a release of the lien, which I've done for people in the past. Basically, you have to go back and make a cash offer. It's no longer an offer in compromise, which is good. It's a little less cumbersome, but it still does require a separate action. Credit, it absolutely could show up on your credit as a charge-off. You won't be able to get another SBA loan. If you settle your loan, they're going to blacklist you. But, depending on how much you save, it's probably still worth it. And that's about it. I'm at 30 minutes here, folks. So that's a gist of the SBA offer and compromise in the year 2024. If you have questions, I offer case evaluations. I'm going to put a link below to my website. And if you have questions, feel free to schedule some time, and I'd be happy to talk to you. Thanks for checking in, and thanks for hanging in with me. I know this was a long one. Thanks.